I am Layla, 34 years old, and I just found the courage to stand up to my manipulative parents. At our family gathering, I finally told the truth about why all my siblings left. You should have seen their shocked faces when I congratulated them on losing their last child, me. After everything with my ex-fiancé, who cheated with my ex-boyfriend's sister, and their attempts to force me back together with him after his arrest for harassment, it was time. If you have ever had to set boundaries with toxic family, let me know where you are watching from, subscribe, and share your experience in the comments below. Growing up in a traditional American family in Boston shaped much of who I am today, though not always in positive ways. My parents, James and Margaret Wilson, built their entire lives around maintaining a perfect image. Our colonial-style home, with its pristine white exterior and meticulously maintained garden, was just like their approach to family. Everything had to look flawless from the outside. From an early age, I understood that appearances mattered more than anything to my parents. Dad worked as a corporate lawyer, while Mom was involved in various charity organizations and social clubs. They moved in circles where family reputation was currency, and they guarded ours zealously. My two older brothers, Thomas and Andrew, felt the weight of our parents' expectations first. Thomas was the academic star, pressured to follow Dad into law, despite his passion for music. Andrew was the athletic one, pushed into competitive sports he gradually grew to resent. I was the youngest, the quiet observer who learned early that the path of least resistance meant gaining their approval. Our family photos, displayed prominently throughout the house, told the story they wanted others to see: smiling faces and perfect poses. What those photos never showed were the tense dinners, the criticism over grades less than perfect, or the constant comparisons to other families' children. The Johnsons' daughter got accepted to Yale. What are your plans, Layla? This was their way of saying my state university ambitions were disappointing them. The breaking point for Thomas came during his senior year of high school. He had secretly applied to Berklee College of Music alongside the Ivy League schools our parents demanded. When his acceptance letter arrived, and he announced his intention to study music composition, my parents erupted. "No son of mine is wasting his potential on something as frivolous as music," Dad had shouted, ripping up the acceptance letter. "Either you go to Harvard like we discussed, or you can forget about our support." Thomas chose freedom over their approval. He packed his bags that night and left with only what he could carry. I was 16 when I watched my brother walk out the door. Mom and Dad spoke of him afterward as if he had died. Such a shame about Thomas. He had so much potential. 3 years later, Andrew followed a similar path. He had met Sophia during college, a wonderful woman who came from a working-class family. When he announced their engagement, our parents were furious. "She's after your money," Mom had insisted, "and her family will never fit in with our circle." The final ultimatum came at a family dinner where my parents had invited Sophia's family in a thinly veiled attempt to humiliate them. Andrew saw through it immediately. By dessert, he and Sophia had left, and by morning, his room was empty too. The last text I received from him read, "I'm sorry to leave you alone with them, Layla. Stay strong." And just like that, I became the only child left, the last hope for my parents' perfect family narrative. The pressure intensified as they transferred all their expectations onto me. My psychology degree was acceptable only because I promised to pursue a doctorate eventually. My career as a counselor at a community health center was tolerated because it had a veneer of respectability, though they frequently suggested more prestigious options. The Williamses' daughter works for that private practice downtown. They're always looking for people with your qualifications. Mom would casually mention leaving brochures on my coffee table when she visited. Family gatherings became exercises in fiction as my parents explained away my brother's absences with elaborate lies. "Thomas is conducting research in Europe this year, such important work." Or, "Andrew and his wife are at her family's cabin, they send their love," all while neither had spoken to our parents in years. I maintained minimal contact with both brothers through secret emails and occasional phone calls. They had built new lives, found happiness, and advised me to do the same. but something in me still craved my parents' approval, still believed I could somehow be enough to heal our broken family. As the years passed, I became adept at navigating my parents' expectations, giving just enough to maintain peace while carving out small freedoms where I could. I had my own apartment by 25, though they happened to find me a place just 10 minutes from their home. I had my own friends, though I learned quickly not to bring home anyone who might not meet their standards. This delicate balance was my life for years until I met Noah at my friend Jamie's 30th birthday party. That night, everything changed, setting in motion events that would eventually force me to make the hardest decision of my life. I still remember exactly what Noah was wearing the night we met. A navy blue button-down shirt that made his eyes look impossibly blue and dark jeans that suggested casual confidence. He was leaning against the bar, talking animatedly to Jamie's husband when our eyes met across the crowded apartment. "You must be Layla," he said when Jamie introduced us. "Jamie has told me about her brilliant friend, the counselor. I've been looking forward to meeting you." His smile was disarming, genuine in a way that immediately put me at ease. Noah told me he was an architect currently working on a downtown revitalization project. As we talked, I discovered he had a quick wit and an intense way of focusing on me when I spoke that made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. "I design buildings because I believe spaces shape how we feel and who we become," he explained, and I found myself nodding in agreement, thinking about how my childhood home had shaped me. We exchanged numbers that night, and by the following weekend, we were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant where he knew the owner by name. Noah was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work helping people through crisis. "It takes someone special to carry others' burdens without breaking," he said, reaching across the table to hold my hand. Our relationship progressed quickly. Noah was decisive about everything from which movie we would see to which restaurant deserved our patronage. After years of my parents' subtle control, his confidence felt refreshing rather than alarming. When he suggested moving in together after 6 months, I agreed without hesitation. "Why wait when you know it's right?" he reasoned, and I believed him. My parents surprisingly approved of Noah immediately. In retrospect, I should have seen this as a warning sign, but at the time, I was simply relieved. "He has ambition," my father noted after meeting Noah at Sunday dinner. "And connections in the right circles." "Such a handsome couple," my mother added. "You finally found someone suitable." Noah attended family events with practiced ease, complimenting my mother's taste in decor and discussing business opportunities with my father. He knew exactly which wines to praise and which topics to avoid. In family photos, we looked perfect, just as my parents had always wanted. Looking back, I can identify the red flags that appeared early on, but seemed insignificant at the time. Noah would check my phone while I showered, explaining it away as looking for a number or email he needed. He would question who I was meeting for lunch, suggesting alternatives if he didn't approve of my choice. "Jamie seems a bit immature for someone in your position," he would say. "Wouldn't you rather meet Sarah from my office? She's more on your level." Gradually, my circle of friends narrowed to those Noah approved of, mostly couples from his work or old college friends he trusted. I rationalized his behavior, telling myself it came from a place of caring, of wanting the best for me. He had shared stories of a difficult childhood with an alcoholic mother and absent father, and I interpreted his control issues as insecurity, something we could work through together. The proposal came during my parents' 30th anniversary party at their country club. Noah had apparently asked their permission weeks before and planned the whole thing with their blessing. In front of 80 guests, he dropped to one knee and presented a diamond ring that later I would learn had been selected with my mother's input. "Layla Wilson, you're everything I've been looking for. Will you make me the happiest man alive and become my wife?" With cameras flashing and my parents beaming approval. What choice did I really have? I said yes and was immediately swept into a whirlwind of congratulations and wedding planning. The engagement party, orchestrated by my parents and Noah, was featured in the local society pages. My mother took charge of wedding arrangements, booking a venue for the following spring without consulting me. Noah had opinions on everything from the guest list to my wedding dress. "Something classic and elegant," he insisted when I showed him a slightly more modern design I favored. "We want timeless photos, don't we?" As wedding planning intensified, so did Noah's controlling behavior. He insisted on joining me for dress fittings, vetoing styles he deemed too revealing or not sophisticated enough. He questioned my choice of bridesmaids, suggesting I reconsider including Jamie, who he felt was unpredictable. "We need people we can count on for such an important day," he explained, as if it were perfectly reasonable to exclude my oldest friend. The stress began affecting my work. I found myself distracted during sessions with clients, sometimes catching myself staring at the engagement ring that felt increasingly heavy on my finger. One of my supervisors noticed and gently suggested I might benefit from speaking with someone myself. "Planning a wedding while maintaining your caseload is a lot, Layla. There's no shame in seeking support." I brushed off her concern, insisting everything was fine. After all, wasn't this what I had always wanted? Approval from my parents, a successful fiancé, and the promise of the perfect life they had always envisioned for me. If I felt a growing unease, surely that was just pre-wedding jitters everyone experienced. What I didn't realize then was that the foundation of my relationship with Noah was built on the same shaky ground as my relationship with my parents, a desperate need for approval and fear of rejection that made me willing to compromise who I really was. It would take a devastating betrayal to finally open my eyes to the truth, to understand the full impact of what happened with Noah. I need to take you back to my college years and my relationship with Daniel. We met during freshman orientation at Boston University, both of us nervous, excited, and completely unsure about what the future held. Daniel was studying journalism and had a passionate interest in international politics that I found fascinating. With his curly brown hair that was perpetually messy and glasses that kept sliding down his nose when he got excited about a topic, he wasn't the conventional definition of handsome, but his enthusiasm for life was magnetic. "I want to tell stories that matter," he would say, "stories that change how people see the world." Our relationship developed naturally from friendship to love. Unlike the whirlwind with Noah years later, Daniel and I grew together, slowly learning each other's quirks and dreams. He was my first serious boyfriend, my first love, and for 3 years we built a life that felt genuine and equal. About 6 months into our relationship, I met his younger sister Jessica when she visited campus. Jessica was still in high school, then a vibrant 16-year-old with her brother's same curly hair, but a more outgoing personality. She immediately attached herself to me, declaring that she finally had the sister she always wanted. "You're stuck with me now, Layla," she announced over pizza in Daniel's dorm room. "Brother's girlfriends are legally obligated to take sister shopping and share all beauty secrets." Over the next few years, Jessica became a fixture in my life. When she followed us to BU 2 years later, our bond strengthened further. We had weekly movie nights, shopping trips where we helped each other find the perfect outfits, and late-night conversations about everything from career ambitions to relationship advice. Though Daniel was my boyfriend, Jessica became the sister I never had. By our senior year, however, Daniel and I began facing the reality that our paths were diverging. He had accepted an internship with a news agency in Washington, D.C. that would likely turn into a full-time position, while I was committed to my counseling program in Boston. We had several painful but honest conversations about our future. "I love you," Daniel said during our final talk, holding my hands across a coffee shop table. "But I don't think either of us should compromise our dreams. That would lead to resentment eventually." Our breakup was amicable, a mutual decision based on practical realities rather than any loss of affection. We promised to remain friends, and unlike many such promises made during breakups, we actually kept ours. Daniel moved to D.C. and I stayed in Boston, but we maintained regular contact through calls and occasional visits. My friendship with Jessica continued unchanged. If anything, she seemed determined to prove that her relationship with me wasn't dependent on her brother. She would regularly invite me for coffee or shopping, insisting that sisters don't break up just because brothers move away. Over the years, as Daniel built his career in journalism and eventually met Amanda, the woman who would become his wife, Jessica, and I remained close. She studied psychology like me, but focused on research rather than counseling. When I announced my engagement to Noah, Jessica was one of the first people I called. Her reaction, in hindsight, should have been my first warning. Instead of the excited squeal I expected, there was a pause before she offered congratulations. "That's wonderful, Layla. You seem happy. How long have you known him?" When I explained we'd been together less than a year, another pause followed. "That seems fast, doesn't it? Are you sure this is what you want?" I dismissed her concerns as protective instinct and invited her to meet Noah, certain she would understand once she saw us together. The dinner was pleasant enough on the surface, with Noah turning on his usual charm. But I noticed Jessica watching him carefully, particularly when he ordered for me without asking what I wanted. A week later, she texted asking if we could meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at our favorite cafe, and after some hesitant small talk, Jessica got to the point. "Layla, I'm concerned about some things I noticed with Noah. The way he speaks for you, the comments about your clothes being too casual. Those are control patterns I recognize from my research." I became defensive, immediately accusing her of being jealous or unable to see that different relationships work in different ways. Jessica tried to push further, mentioning something about having heard rumors about Noah from mutual acquaintances, but I cut her off. "I thought you would be happy for me," I said, gathering my things to leave. I guess I was wrong. When I told Noah about the lunch later, his reaction was explosive. He demanded to see my phone and read through all my text exchanges with Jessica, then insisted I cut all ties with her immediately. "She's obviously trying to sabotage us," he declared, "and by extension, she's trying to damage my relationship with your family. I won't have it." To keep peace, I began declining Jessica's invitations and responding to her texts with increasing brevity until she got the message. The last text I received from her haunts me still. "I'm always here when you need me, Layla. No matter what, remember that." Little did I know then how prophetic those words would be, or how deeply I would regret pushing away someone who only wanted to protect me from what was coming. The day everything fell apart started like any other. Noah had an early client meeting, so I had the apartment to myself for the morning. I was enjoying a rare, peaceful breakfast when his phone buzzed on the counter where he'd forgotten it. Normally, I would never check his messages, but the name that flashed on the screen stopped me cold. Jessica. Why would Noah be getting texts from Jessica? They barely knew each other, and I had essentially stopped communicating with her at his insistence months ago. A sick feeling of dread washed over me as I picked up the phone. The preview showed just enough to make my heart race. "Last night was amazing, but we need to be more careful. Layla almost..." My hands were shaking as I unlocked his phone. Noah had shared his password months ago in what he called a gesture of complete transparency. Now I understood it had been nothing but a calculated move to appear trustworthy while keeping his own secrets. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. Hundreds of messages between them spanning the last 6 months, beginning shortly after our engagement. Explicit conversations detailing their physical relationship, plans for secret meetings when I was working late or visiting my parents. Photos I can't bring myself to describe even now. But worst of all were the messages where they discussed me laughing about how oblivious I was, how easily manipulated. "She actually thinks I stopped talking to you because he told me to," Jessica had written. "As if I'd listen to anyone but you." Noah's response: "That's my good little puppet fiancé, so desperate for approval she'll believe anything." I felt physically ill running to the bathroom where I threw up my breakfast. My mind was racing, trying to process this double betrayal. My future husband and the woman I'd considered a sister had been carrying on an affair behind my back for months, mocking me throughout. When Noah came home that evening, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table, his phone placed in the center, beside printed copies of some of their messages. His face, when he saw what awaited him, shifted from confusion to shock to a calculated blankness I would come to recognize as his planning face. "Layla, this isn't what it looks like." He began the first lie in what would become a flood of deception. "Really? Because it looks like you've been sleeping with Jessica for the past 6 months while planning our wedding. It looks like you've both been laughing at me behind my back." My voice was surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. He tried several approaches in rapid succession. First denial, claiming the messages were fake or that someone must have hacked his phone. When I pointed out I had seen them appear in real time, he switched to minimizing. "It was just a physical thing, meaningless. I made a mistake." When that didn't work, he moved to blame, his voice taking on a wounded quality I now realized was completely manufactured. "You've been so distant lately, so focused on work. I was lonely and she was there. You know how persuasive she can be." Finally, seeing none of his tactics were working, he resorted to the truth, or at least a version of it. "Fine. Yes, Jessica and I have been seeing each other. It started at that dinner you arranged. There was an attraction neither of us could deny. 6 months, Noah. Half our relationship, half our engagement." He shrugged, dropping the pretense entirely now that he knew he was caught. "What can I say? You are convenient, respectable. Your family loves me. Jessica is exciting, spontaneous, everything you're not. I thought I could have both." Something in me broke and reformed in that moment. All the years of seeking approval, of compromising myself to please others, crystallized into a perfect clarity. I removed the engagement ring and placed it on top of the printed messages. "Get out. You have until tomorrow to collect your things. I'll be staying with Jamie tonight. If you're not gone when I return, I'll send these messages to everyone we know, including my parents and your firm's partners." His face darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. This puppet just cut her strings." I packed an overnight bag and left, ignoring his calls that quickly turned from pleading to threatening. The next day, with Jamie's boyfriend as escort, I returned to find the apartment empty of his possessions. I changed the locks that afternoon. What I didn't realize was that this wasn't the end, but merely the beginning of a nightmare that would test every ounce of my strength over the coming months. The first week after discovering Noah's betrayal was strangely peaceful. He seemed to accept the breakup, and I began the process of canceling wedding arrangements and returning gifts. My parents were surprisingly subdued when I called to tell them the wedding was off, though they pressed for details I wasn't ready to share. "Sometimes these things just don't work out," I said vaguely, not yet ready to discuss the humiliating details of the affair. That fragile peace shattered on day 8 when the first barrage of texts arrived. 63 messages in a single hour, ranging from apologies to accusations to declarations of undying love. "I made a terrible mistake. You're overreacting. It was just sex. We can work through this. We're meant to be together. You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do." I blocked his number only to have him start calling from different phones. When I blocked those too, he began showing up at my workplace, causing scenes that left me mortified and my colleagues concerned. "Noah, you need to leave," I told him firmly when he appeared in the waiting room with roses. "This is my place of work. I'm not going anywhere until you agree to talk to me." He responded loudly enough that several clients turned to stare. "You owe me that much." Security eventually escorted him out, but he returned the next day and the next, each time with a different approach, but the same disregard for boundaries. My supervisor pulled me aside after the third incident. Layla, is there something going on that you need help with? These disruptions are affecting our ability to provide care to clients. I broke down then, sharing the whole sordid story. My workplace immediately implemented security measures, routing all my calls through reception and having someone escort me to my car each evening. They were supportive, but I could see the situation was becoming untenable. Noah seemed to sense that work was now off limits, so he changed tactics, showing up at my favorite coffee shop, the grocery store I frequented even outside Jamie's apartment where I was temporarily staying. It was as if he had memorized my entire routine and was determined to insert himself into every moment of my day. The texts and calls continued from new numbers faster than I could block them. Emails flooded my inbox from accounts created solely to contact me. Packages arrived at my door with no return address, containing everything from jewelry to handwritten letters 20 pages long. Friends reported that he had contacted them seeking information about me, alternately playing the heartbroken fiancé, or suggesting I was mentally unwell and needed intervention. Some believed him creating painful divisions in my support network. The situation escalated when Jamie's neighbors reported seeing someone who matched Noah's description attempting to access the building's fire escape one evening when we were out. That night, I filed for a restraining order, gathering evidence of the harassment, including texts, emails, witness statements, and security footage from my workplace. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later, during which time Noah seemed to intuit what was happening and temporarily retreated. When we finally faced each other in court, I hardly recognized him. Gone was the disheveled, emotional man who had been harassing me. In his place stood a composed, professional-looking Noah in an impeccable suit, speaking calmly and reasonably to the judge. "Your Honor, this is simply a misunderstanding between former partners. Ms. Wilson has been under tremendous stress lately, and I believe she has misinterpreted my attempts to achieve closure as something more sinister." His performance was masterful, portraying himself as concerned, rather than controlling, passionate, rather than obsessive. If I hadn't had such overwhelming evidence, including footage of him attempting to enter Jamie's apartment, I might have lost. As it was, the judge granted the restraining order, but with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Davis, please maintain a distance of at least 100 yards from Ms. Wilson, her home, and her workplace for a period of 1 year." Noah's face when the ruling was announced revealed the rage beneath his composed exterior, a fleeting expression of such hatred that the court officer stepped closer to me protectively. That glimpse of his true nature chilled me to my core. The restraining order should have been the end of it, but Noah seemed to view it as a challenge rather than a legal requirement. He began violating it almost immediately, though always in ways just subtle enough to create plausible deniability. A car identical to his would park just beyond the 100-yard boundary of my apartment. Deliveries would arrive from anonymous senders. Friends would mention running into him and how he had asked about me with such concern. Each violation I reported was met with increasing skepticism by police, who viewed it as a domestic dispute rather than the psychological terrorism it had become. "Without clear evidence that it was definitely him, there's not much we can do," became their standard response. Until the night, everything escalated beyond even Noah's careful calculations. I was awakened at 2 a.m. by the sound of breaking glass. Noah, clearly intoxicated, had broken through my balcony door and was standing in my living room swaying slightly and holding a small jewelry box. "I just want to talk," he slurred, moving toward my bedroom. "You never gave me a chance to explain." I had locked my bedroom door instinctively upon hearing the glass break and called 911 immediately. "My ex-fiancé has broken into my apartment. He's violating a restraining order. Please hurry." The 12 minutes it took police to arrive were the longest of my life, listening to Noah alternate between pleading and threatening on the other side of the door. When officers finally arrived and arrested him, his mask of reasonableness fell away completely. "This is all your fault," he screamed as they led him away. "You'll regret this, Layla. No one leaves me." The subsequent court case resulted in Noah receiving probation for violating the restraining order, with the judge warning him that any further violations would result in jail time. It should have been a victory, but instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter of manipulation, one that would involve my parents in ways I never could have anticipated. My parents' reaction to the entire situation was perhaps the most painful betrayal of all. When I finally shared the full story with them, including Jessica's involvement and Noah's escalating harassment, I expected sympathy outrage on my behalf, protective instincts to kick in. Instead, I was met with disbelief and subtle blame. "Are you sure you understood what you saw?" my mother asked, frowning slightly. "Men and women can be friends, Layla. Perhaps you jumped to conclusions." "Noah explained it all to us," my father added. "He says there was a misunderstanding about some joking messages between him and your friend." The shock of hearing they had been in contact with Noah without telling me left me momentarily speechless. "You've been talking to him after everything I told you. He called us naturally concerned about your mental state," Mom replied. "He says you've been under tremendous pressure at work and might be having some sort of breakdown." "A breakdown? He broke into my apartment. He was arrested." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "He had a few drinks and wanted to talk to his fiancé. Perhaps not the best judgment, but hardly criminal behavior." "Ex-fiancé," I corrected firmly. "And breaking and entering is literally criminal behavior. That's why he was arrested." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents subtly but persistently undermining my experience. My mother suggested I might have led Noah on or given him mixed signals. My father expressed concern about the social embarrassment of a canceled wedding and the unfortunate publicity of Noah's arrest, potentially affecting his standing at his firm, where my father had connections. "Have you considered what this is doing to his career?" Dad asked, as if Noah's professional reputation should be my primary concern after everything that had happened. By the end of that dinner, the battle lines had been drawn. My parents had chosen Noah's version of events over mine, their perfect future son-in-law over their actual daughter. It was a stunning realization that in their eyes, I was the dispensable one, just as my brothers had been before me. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Sunday family dinners became interrogations about my dating life, with not-so-subtle hints that forgiveness is a virtue, and everyone deserves a second chance. My mother would casually mention running into Noah at charity functions, describing how devastated he appeared. "He's lost weight, poor thing," she would say while passing the potatoes. "Hardly sleeping according to mutual friends." My father took a more direct approach, presenting logical arguments for reconciliation, as if my broken engagement were a business merger that could be renegotiated with proper terms. "Noah has agreed to couples counseling. He's willing to sign a prenuptial agreement with infidelity clauses. These are reasonable compromises, Layla." I stopped attending Sunday dinners after that, claiming work commitments that didn't exist, but my absence only intensified their campaign. They began showing up at my apartment unannounced, bringing food and thinly veiled lectures about forgiveness and family unity. The breaking point came at my cousin Whitney's wedding, 3 months after my broken engagement. I had nearly decided not to attend, fearing what my parents might orchestrate, but Whitney had been kind throughout my ordeal, and I wanted to support her. I should have trusted my instincts. Halfway through the reception, I spotted a familiar figure approaching my table. Noah, perfectly groomed in a tailored suit, wearing an expression of practiced humility. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, looking around frantically for security or someone who might help. "There's a restraining order." "I was invited," he replied calmly, showing me an invitation with his name clearly printed. "By your parents as a family friend. Restraining orders don't apply to coincidental meetings at public events. Any lawyer will tell you that." I located my parents across the room, watching our interaction with expressions of hopeful anticipation. The setup was so obvious, it was almost laughable. Almost. I left the wedding immediately, ignoring my mother's calls and texts, claiming they thought it would be good for us to talk in a public setting. When I finally answered my phone the next day, the conversation confirmed my worst fears. "We may have orchestrated a little meeting," my mother admitted without a trace of remorse. "Sometimes people need a push in the right direction. You deliberately violated a legal restraining order and put me in a position where I had to see my abuser," I responded, my voice shaking with rage. "What kind of parents do that to their child?" "Don't be so dramatic, Layla. Noah is not an abuser. He made a mistake and deserves forgiveness. When your father had his little indiscretion with his secretary years ago, I forgave him because that's what adults do." This casual revelation of my father's infidelity dropped, as if it were common knowledge, explained so much about their marriage and their reaction to Noah's betrayal. They weren't just dismissing my feelings, they were defending a worldview where appearances mattered more than happiness, where women were expected to tolerate betrayal for the sake of social standing. After that conversation, I reduced contact with my parents to brief text messages confirming I was alive. I thought perhaps the distance would make them reconsider their actions, but instead, it seemed to strengthen their resolve to bring me back into the fold on their terms. The final straw came 2 months later, when they invited me to dinner at their home to discuss family matters. Against my better judgment, I agreed, hoping for some sign that they had reconsidered their position. I arrived to find not just my parents, but also Noah seated at the dining room table, along with several extended family members who had been recruited for this intervention. And at the far end of the table, looking uncomfortable but present nonetheless, sat Jessica. My father stood as I entered, raising his glass as if this were a celebration rather than an ambush. "Layla, thank you for coming. We've gathered everyone here to help heal our family." Noah stepped forward, taking a practiced stance of contrition. "Layla, I know I hurt you deeply. Jessica and I have both come to apologize and ask for your forgiveness." Jessica then delivered a tearful apology that seemed rehearsed to perfection. "I betrayed our friendship in the worst possible way. I've been in therapy understanding why I would hurt someone I care about. I'm asking for a chance to make amends." My mother then took my arm, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Now, Layla, we all make mistakes. The important thing is forgiveness and moving forward. Noah and Jessica have both acknowledged their error. It's time for closure so we can all heal as a family." Looking around the table at the expectant faces of relatives who had no idea of the full story, at Noah's calculated expression of remorse, at Jessica's tears that stopped flowing, the moment attention shifted from her at my parents' triumphant expressions, something inside me finally irrevocably broke. This orchestrated performance was the culmination of a lifetime of manipulation, of being molded to fit their narrative regardless of my feelings or well-being. In that moment, I understood completely why my brothers had cut contact entirely. And I knew it was time for me to do the same. The annual family reunion at my parents' lake house had been a tradition since before I was born. Relatives from across the country would gather for a weekend of forced bonding, passive-aggressive competitions, thinly disguised as family fun, and endless photo opportunities for my mother's social media. This year, it fell exactly 2 weeks after the disastrous reconciliation dinner my parents had orchestrated. I debated not attending, but after several therapy sessions focused on boundaries and self-advocacy, I made a different decision. I would go, but this time, I would speak my truth, consequences be damned. The lake house was as picturesque as ever, a sprawling cedar structure overlooking the water, surrounded by pine trees and meticulously maintained gardens. As I pulled into the long driveway, I saw the usual collection of luxury cars and SUVs, indicating the full extended family had already arrived. My mother greeted me with air kisses and a critical once-over of my casual attire. "Everyone's on the back deck for cocktails. Do hurry and change into something more appropriate." I ignored her suggestion and made my way through the house, exchanging pleasantries with aunts, uncles, and cousins who knew nothing of the real dynamics at play. My father was holding court by the grill, telling some business anecdote that had his brothers nodding appreciatively. "Ah, Layla has arrived," he announced, gesturing me over with the false joviality he reserved for public appearances. "Just in time for my famous steaks." Throughout the afternoon, I observed the familiar patterns of our family interactions with new clarity. The way certain relatives were showcased, while others were subtly diminished. The constant references to status markers, like private schools, vacation properties, and business connections. The underlying current of competition in every conversation. By dinner time, when everyone gathered around the massive outdoor table overlooking the lake, I had reinforced my resolve. As dessert was being served, I gently tapped my glass with a spoon, standing to address the table. Conversation died down as curious faces turned toward me. "I'd like to say something if I may." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "First, thank you all for being here. Family gatherings like this give us a chance to consider what family truly means." My mother's expression shifted from polite interest to wariness as I continued. "For me, recent events have clarified that family should mean support, respect, and love without conditions. Unfortunately, that hasn't been my experience in this house." A murmur ran through the table as I locked eyes with my father, whose face had hardened into the expression I knew preceded his controlled anger. "Layla, perhaps this isn't the appropriate time," he interrupted, but I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "My brothers Thomas and Andrew didn't abandon this family on a whim, as you've been told. They left because they were given ultimatums that forced them to choose between their own happiness and our parents' approval. Thomas wanted to study music, not law. Andrew fell in love with someone from a working-class background. For these crimes, they were effectively disowned." My Aunt Caroline gasped, turning to my mother with confusion. "Margaret, you told us Thomas was in Europe doing research." I pressed on before my parents could respond. "I stayed believing I could somehow be enough, be perfect enough to heal our family. That was my mistake." Taking a deep breath, I addressed the entire table. "What you don't know is that my engagement ended because my fiancé was having an affair with my close friend. When I discovered their betrayal instead of supporting me, my parents took his side. When he began harassing me to the point that I needed a restraining order, they helped him circumvent it." The shocked expressions around the table gave me courage to continue. "Last month, they orchestrated a surprise dinner where they forced me to face both my ex-fiancé and the woman he cheated with, demanding I forgive them publicly for the sake of appearances. Because in this family, image has always mattered more than well-being." My mother stood abruptly. "That's quite enough, Layla. You're clearly still emotional about the breakup and not thinking clearly." "I've never thought more clearly," I countered. "For years I've watched you and Dad manipulate, control, and discard anyone who didn't fit your perfect family narrative. You drove away both your sons, and now you're about to lose your daughter, too." Turning to address my relatives directly, I continued. "I'm sharing this not to embarrass anyone, but because secrets and appearances have poisoned this family for too long. I won't participate in it anymore." Looking back at my parents, whose faces had moved through shock to fury, to a strange, panicked expression I'd never seen before, I delivered my final thoughts. "Congratulations. You've successfully driven away all 3 of your children with your conditional love and obsession with appearances. I truly hope it was worth it." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of a wine glass shattering as my mother's hand began to tremble uncontrollably. My father stood, his face mottled with rage. "How dare you air family matters like this, after everything we've done for you?" "That's just it, Dad. Everything you've done has been for yourselves, for your image, never for us. And I'm finished pretending otherwise." With those words, I picked up my purse and walked calmly through the stunned gathering toward the house. Behind me, chaos erupted as relatives began questioning my parents, demanding explanations for the lies they'd been told about my brothers, about my engagement, about everything. I was nearly to my car when my mother caught up to me, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Tears streaked her makeup as she grabbed my arm. You can't leave like this. You can't do this to us. We're your parents. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not for my well-being, but for the collapse of the narrative she'd spent decades constructing. Yes, you are my parents, but that doesn't give you the right to control my life or dismiss my pain when it's inconvenient for you. I deserve better. We all did. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. We can work this out. We'll get family counseling. We'll do whatever you want. My father appeared behind her, his anger now replaced with something close to desperation. Layla, think about what you're doing. You're throwing away your family over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding when you chose Noah over me. It wasn't a misunderstanding when you violated a legal restraining order to force us together. Those were choices, and they have consequences. I gently removed my mother's hand from my arm. I forgive you both, because holding on to anger would only hurt me. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to keep you in my life. As I drove away, I watched them growing smaller in my rearview mirror, standing together on the driveway surrounded by curious relatives. For the first time in my life, I felt no obligation to manage their feelings or protect their image. That burden had been lifted, replaced by a lightness I hadn't experienced since childhood. The months that followed were a time of rebuilding. I found an apartment in a nearby city, changed my phone number, and focused on healing. My work as a counselor took on new meaning as I applied the lessons of my own experience to helping others establish healthy boundaries. I started a support group for people with controlling families, creating the community I had needed during my own struggles. Through this group, I met people who became true friends, chosen family, who accepted me without conditions or expectations. Occasionally, messages would reach me through extended family. My parents were devastated, telling anyone who would listen that I was having a mental health crisis. They had hired a private investigator to find my new address. They had consulted lawyers about adult guardianship options, claiming I was unstable. When these tactics failed, they apparently shifted to a different approach, presenting themselves as concerned, loving parents desperate to reconnect with their troubled daughter. They began attending family therapy, sharing carefully edited versions of our story that cast them as imperfect but well-meaning parents, blindsided by their daughter's sudden rejection. For 6 months, I maintained complete no contact, focusing entirely on my own healing. I reconnected with Thomas, now a successful composer in Los Angeles, and Andrew, who had built a happy life with Sophia and their 2 children in Chicago. Their validation of my experience was profoundly healing, confirming that the dynamics I had named were real and not products of my imagination, as our parents had often suggested. The inevitable confrontation came when my parents appeared at my workplace one afternoon, somehow having discovered my new location. They looked older, somehow diminished, as they approached the reception desk asking for me. I could have refused to see them, but something in me needed this final conversation. We sat in a small conference room, the professional setting helping me maintain my composure. "You look well," my mother began awkwardly. "We've been so worried." "I am well," I replied simply. "Better than I've been in years, actually." My father cleared his throat. "Layla, we've come to apologize. These months without you have been illuminating. We've been in counseling trying to understand where we went wrong." "We miss you terribly," my mother added, tears filling her eyes. "We want to make amends, to be a family again." I studied them carefully, noting the designer clothes, the perfect hair, the practiced expressions of contrition. Were they truly changed, or was this another performance? "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "And I genuinely hope your therapy is helping you understand the harm your actions caused, not just to me but to Thomas and Andrew as well." Yes. My father nodded eagerly. "We've reached out to the boys too. We're trying to heal all the relationships we damaged. That's good to hear. Everyone deserves the chance to grow and change. My mother brightened. Then you'll come home? We could start with Sunday dinner this weekend, just the three of us. No, I said gently but firmly. I won't be coming home. I've forgiven you both, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean returning to relationships that were harmful. But we've changed, my father protested, anger flashing briefly before he controlled it. We're doing everything you wanted. That's just it. You're still seeing this as a transaction, something you can fix by checking boxes to get what you want. Real change would mean respecting my boundaries even when they're not what you want to hear. My mother's tears turned from sorrow to frustration. After everything we've done for you, you owe us another chance. I don't owe you a relationship. No child does. Relationships are earned through respect and trust, both of which were broken repeatedly. As they realized I wouldn't be swayed, their facade began to crack. My father's face hardened into familiar lines of disapproval. My mother's pleading turned to accusations of cruelty and ingratitude. It confirmed what I had suspected, that their apparent change was surface level, a means to an end, rather than genuine transformation. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I wish you both well, truly. I hope you find peace and happiness, but my boundaries remain firm. This isn't over, my father warned as I opened the door. You can't just throw away your family. I turned back one last time. I didn't throw away my family. I'm building one based on mutual respect and unconditional love. You're welcome to be part of that family someday, but only if you can accept me as I am, not as you wish me to be. Walking away from that meeting, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had faced my greatest fear, the loss of parental approval, and survived. More than survived, I was thriving. In the years since that confrontation, I've created a life that feels authentically mine for the first time. I maintain limited, carefully boundaried contact with my parents, who seem to be slowly, imperfectly learning to respect those boundaries. I've rebuilt relationships with my brothers, healing old wounds, and creating new traditions that celebrate our independence and resilience. Most importantly, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by love, respect, and the freedom to be your authentic self. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from relationships that demand we diminish ourselves to maintain them. And sometimes, giving others a reality check about the consequences of their actions is the kindest gift we can offer, even when it feels like cruelty in the moment. If you've ever struggled with toxic family dynamics or had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones, know that you're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by others' approval, and you deserve relationships that honor your whole authentic self. Please share your own experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own well-being, even when it disappoints others. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true family supports your growth, not their image.